Headlines tonight.
How would these...
Primark involved in investigations over child labour.
The use of labour.
MS sufferer loses court case battle over assisted suicide.
Also, Stoke speaks out, causing the elected mayor to be replaced in a shock referendum.
If you get an elected mayor, you've got that mayor for 4 years.
And finally, has product placement gone too far? Is it the end of our film industry as we know it?
Good evening, this is KMTV News with Michael Forrester
and Victoria Scott.
Our main story tonight is the allegation over clothing giant Primark's involvement in child labour.
After the recent allegations, our reporter Rasha Hussain took to the streets of Stoke-on-Trent to investigate the potential extent of exploitation in Primark's garment manufacture.
Primark, the corporate fashion chain, had been buying clothes from suppliers who use child labour. A spokesperson from Primark said that it was robbing 3 Indian companies that make thousands of clothes for its stores after discovering they have subcontract work out to companies that in some cases use children for embroidery work. But is it still possible to get cheap clothing without exploiting employees? Primark is now the UK's second biggest clothing retailer by volume, with only Marks & Spencer selling more garments and accounts for £1 in every £10 spent on clothing, where it trades under the pennies brands. Primark employs in excess of 25,000 people. In GP, in terms of market share, Tains ranks Primark as GP's second largest clothing retailer by volume, and Predicts Research now places Primark as the leading retailer in value clothing. Nazmul, 24, whose job is to stick pins into shirts, said he regularly worked more than 80 hours a week with only 1 day off a fortnight. With overtime, he makes 24,000 taka, which is £17 a month. If a big order comes in, we have to work. In Britain, you get 3 for 2 offers. It is we people who make the third shirt for you. There's no choice, we just get shouted. There are others who will take my place if I do not work. Mohammed Lutfur Rahman, Vice President of Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association, said Western companies had imposed codes of consent inspector to enforce the rules, counting fire exits and auditing overtime records. I'm asked about how many lights will be used in the factory and where is our toilet, but who pays for these things? The bias profits are going up. But if we ask for more money for improvement, they say China is very cheap. It's a threat to move the work somewhere else. Geoff Lancaster, head of public relations at Primark, said the company had been involved in trying to raise standards in Bangladesh and will investigate. It denied it was cutting costs, so British shoppers benefited from cheap prices. We use huge volumes, deal directly with suppliers, cutting out the middlemen, and do not advertise. That's how we get best value.
How would these clothes be made so cheaply without the use of labour of people abroad?
It's market forces, isn't it? So to offer the prices they do, probably not. I mean, but you get cheap prices wherever you go. So the supermarkets do it, so somebody has to compete, I suppose. But the prices they get to, no, I doubt it.
Because you're paying people between £200 and £500 a week in England for manufacture these products, where abroad you're paying a fraction of that. I'd say in some countries I'd say £10 a week for one person, but here it's like between about £250 to £500 a week.
Children don't get paid much for doing what they do, and then we buy it cheap, so
it's all good in the
really.
Rasha Hussain from KMTV News.
It's a sad reality in this day and age.
However, a very interesting report there from Russia.
In national news, Debbie Purdy, a sufferer of the muscular wasting disease, multiple sclerosis, has lost her appeal to the courts, calling for a change in the law on assisted suicide. Mrs. Purdy wishes to travel to the Dignitas clinic in Switzerland, where euthanasia is legal, but wants to protect her husband from prosecution upon his return to the UK.
Amanda Kearney has more on this story.
The current law, a clause in the Suicide Act of 1961, states that a person who aids, abets, counsels or procures the suicide of another or an attempt by another to commit suicide shall be liable on conviction of indictment to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 14 years. Mrs Purdy has been fighting to clarify what constitutes aiding and abetting suicide so that her husband, jazz musician Omar Puente, will not be subjected to police questioning or investigation after Mrs Purdy's passing. Mrs Purdy from Bradford was diagnosed with MS in 1995 and strongly believes in clarification of the law. After the ruling was made, Debbie Purdy said, "I don't understand how it can have got to 47 years down the line from the Suicide Act from 1961 and no one has looked at it more seriously. I want politicians to debate what needs to be done, because if people talk about needing safeguards, protecting the vulnerable, we have to know what is necessary to protect people." KMTV News got in touch with Dignity in Dying, who supported Purdy in her court case, and also Care Not Killing, to gauge their reactions to the proposed change in the suicide law.
Sarah Wootton, Chief Executive of Dignity in Dying. While we welcome the judge's decision to fast-track Debbie's appeal, we are disappointed with the verdict. All Debbie wanted was some clarity so that she could make an informed decision, something that is common sense to most of us. Our laws are failing to promote choice and protect vulnerable people. At present, people are travelling abroad to die, there are mercy killings, botched suicides, and some doctors are already assisting their patients to die. It is not acceptable to defend a status quo which condemns some terminally ill adults to unnecessary suffering against their wishes. There is clearly an urgent need for a debate around assisted dying, and it's time that that debate was had, both inside and outside of Parliament.
However, the Care Not Killing group believe that if the law is amended, it could be abused. They issued this statement to KMTV News.
We welcome this decision. The current law is very clear and does not require the sort of clarification that has been sought in this case. There has been a huge amount of media interest in this case, but the High Court judges, in giving permission for Debbie Purdy to proceed with the hearing, had made it very clear that they were not giving her any grounds for optimism that her arguments would succeed. We are not surprised that the court found that in order to protect vulnerable people from exploitation, the current law should be upheld.
Mrs Purdy's case is not the first of its kind. It is known that over 90 Britons have made their way across the sea to end their lives where voluntary euthanasia is legal. It has emerged that some relatives are put under investigations that can last for months, some are formally charged, and some receive very little police attention at all. This begs the question, does the law need to be amended, abolished, or left as it is? At the first hearing of Debbie Purdy's court case, David Panic, who helped represent Mrs Purdy, stated he believed she had well-justified personal reasons for wanting to get clarification on the suicide law. He stated that her dilemma is that she wants to delay her suicide as long as possible. She wants also to avoid the danger of her husband being prosecuted for assisting her. If he is likely to be prosecuted, then she is much more likely to travel abroad to commit suicide sooner rather than later. Voluntary euthanasia is a topic that split public opinion for years, and it looks like this will continue to be the case. This is Amanda Kearney reporting for KMTV News. Back to you in the studio.
If you've been affected by any of the issues mentioned in this report, please call 01782 612 123.
It's a pity that this issue is still affecting people's freedom.